case. Now, what happens next is what's different from my experience as a criminal defense attorney. It's the U.S. Attorney's deference to that letter, to those requests. That's the thing that has struck me from the beginning as a defense attorney, because for the most part, if you lay out your case to U.S. attorneys or the government why your client should not be prosecuted, they'll say, oh, okay, that's interesting, we're still going to prosecute. What's compelling is the level of deference that Acosta's team gave to his defense team, and to some degree, the local prosecutors as well. It's really compelling stuff.
Well, sticking with that aspect of it, Danny, the introduction yesterday, first of all, the U.S. Attorney here in New York Southern District was very forceful, along with the Assistant Director of the FBI, very forceful language about this case. But the plea agreement that you just referenced that was made in Florida, yesterday, the Public Integrity Section of the Southern District, New York, U.S. Attorney's Office, is now involved in this case. What potential threat does that pose to put that plea agreement together, specifically the Labor Secretary, Alex Acosta?
One thing, you say plea agreement. It was actually a non-prosecution agreement. The reason that's significant is that the Southern District of Florida didn't enter into a plea agreement. They did nothing. Their agreement was non-prosecution, based on the idea that, well, local authorities are prosecuting. That's good enough for us. We don't need to get involved and redouble the efforts of local prosecutors because they've done enough on their end. And of course, today we look at that and say, it doesn't really feel like enough was done in this situation. So going forward to your question, yesterday Geoffrey Berman said, don't look too much into the fact that our corruption unit is handling this case. It may or may not mean anything, and I'm paraphrasing. Well, I choose to look a lot into that designation. You know, he called it a mere staffing issue, and I thought yesterday, this is not a temp agency, the DOJ. They assign the folks who are the best at their job, and they are run like a military hierarchy. They have people designated to handle certain kinds of cases, and corruption in the law doesn't mean private individuals like Epstein. It typically refers to government officials, state or federal. That's who that group is normally targeting.
In the New York Times, columnist Michelle Goldberg writes that Jeffrey Epstein is the ultimate symbol of plutocratic rot. Reading here from her piece, quote, the Epstein case is first and foremost about the casual victimization of vulnerable girls, but it is also a political scandal, if not a partisan one. It reveals a deep corruption among mostly male elites across parties and the way the very rich can often purchase impunity for even the most loathsome of crimes. If it were fiction, it would be both too sordid and too on the nose to be believable, like a season of True Detective penned by a doctrinaire Marxist. Epstein socialized with Trump, who in 2002 described him to New York Magazine as a terrific guy whom he'd known for 15 years. It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side, said the future president. In 2000, a porter who worked next door to Epstein's Manhattan home told a British newspaper admiringly, I often see Donald Trump, and there are loads of models coming and going, mostly at night. It's amazing. Epstein also hung out with Bill Clinton, who rode on his jet several times. Ghislaine Maxwell, a close companion of Epstein, who has been accused of working as his procurer, attended Chelsea Clinton's wedding in 2010, long after Epstein's exposure. Following his arrest on Saturday, Christine Pelosi, daughter of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, tweeted, it is quite likely that some of our faves are implicated, but we must follow the facts and let the chips fall where they may. Steve Ratner, I guess this might answer my question, but I was thinking, reading this and reading all these stories that are coming out now that you've been hearing here and there throughout the years, really, about Jeffrey Epstein and the people he hangs out with. But what is it about just Jeffrey Epstein that would make people in the legal community and people with long careers to speak for as prosecutors have deference to him? Is it the powerful people that perhaps were involved with this that could have led to such terrible legal behavior in terms of giving him such a sweet deal out of Florida?
Well, I can't speak to why a prosecutor on the government side of this would choose to agree to this.
But is he such a compelling personality? Is he powerful? What is it about Epstein? Could it just be Epstein that led to this?
What is it about Epstein? It's his money, basically. Jeffrey Epstein, I knew Epstein a bit when he first came to New York. He sort of plunged into the New York scene with a ton of money of uncertain whereabouts. I'm not saying it was illegal, but nobody really understood what his business was or where he came from. Showed up in this mansion and began to surround himself with rich and powerful friends, basically the best friends money could buy, with trips on his plane, with trips to his various islands and resorts and ranches and things like that, and befriended a lot of people. And when he got in trouble, he surrounded himself with every expensive lawyer, the best lawyers he could find with the most money, and they ultimately, however they did it, and we don't know how, managed to convince the federal prosecutors to agree to this non-prosecution agreement. But I think what you've seen, there may be some corruption in there, and as Mike just said, the fact that it's been referred to the Public Integrity Division, even though Jeffrey Berman kind of dismissed that, it seems to be an interesting factoid. But how they did it, we don't know. But when you bring to bear the most expensive, powerful, influential, persuasive lawyers in America, you do sometimes get justice to tilt the wrong way, to tilt in favor of the rich and powerful rather than the everyday American.
So, Willie, what's so fascinating also is I remember hearing people all around the set in 2015 talk about people's connections on both sides with Jeffrey Epstein. And as you know, this was not even a hidden secret, and I said it several times on the air in 2016 that both Donald Trump and Bill Clinton knew Jeffrey Epstein very well. And a lot of powerful people in New York knew him very well, and they all knew these stories, every one of them, and had all known it for a very long time. And it does it. If not for Julie Brown and the Miami Herald doggedly picking this story back up.
And some victims trying to speak out.
And victims trying to speak out. Nothing would have happened. It remains a mystery why the prosecutors would do what they would do, and why this entire community in New York that knew of Epstein and knew what he did and ran with Epstein for years, why this didn't come out years before.
Well, look no further than that quote Mika just read. It was 2002 when Donald Trump, then businessman and reality show host, spoke glowingly about Jeffrey Epstein and said he likes girls on the younger side. Well, the indictment yesterday told us the younger side means as young as 14 years old. 14 years old. One of the girls saying she still had braces when she went to Jeffrey Epstein's house. The original indictment from 2008, Eddie, was a 53-page document which basically told the same story that the U.S. attorneys in New York told yesterday. But they told it in Miami, and somehow Jeffrey Epstein walked away with a sentence of 13 months where he could come and go to work as he pleased.
Yeah, and think about all of the girls that were abused between now and then, or then and now. Look, it seems to me a combination of two things. One, we've been using the phrase plutocratic rot. And I think this is important. It cuts through our society. It's compromising our basic democracy at every level of government, and we see it in so many ways in our criminal justice system, and how disproportionately punishment is doled out, who's secured from it and who experiences it, and who are left vulnerable as a result of that difference. But the second part of it is this, is the banality of evil. So you got plutocratic rot, and then you have the people who are around it. And it's everyday people who know that this is going on, that's happening, but who are okay with it. One of the powerful aspects of Michelle Goldberg's column is she's talking about, coming from Vicky Ward's piece in Vanity Fair, that so many people knew. Joe echoed this, Mika echoed this, that so many people knew this was happening. So we saw young girls vulnerable to a predator, and we turned an eye. We turned our head away. And that sounds so familiar to so much of what America, what we're experiencing today in this country. It speaks volumes about
the allure of money.
And of power.
Yeah. And also, it just sort of reminds me in the age of Me Too with some of these big names that behaved terribly for years, and we all saw it happening around us and just let it go by. It's something to consider. That's a great piece that Michelle